Welcome to Books Boys, live from the Grand Library, the Dean and PJ.
He's PJ.
Hello there. How's it going?
I'm the Dean, and we are the Books Boys.
Sure, let me tell you, Dean, about the other day. Sure, I was talking to Jimmy. Uncle Michael, can you please leave the car? Sure, look, I would like to join the show. Uncle Michael, please, this is a very serious a show about books. Is it about a good book? Is it about a good book, Dean? Is it?
It's not. It's about some good books. It's about some good books, I can tell you.
Sure, look, sure, I wouldn't approve of that sort of thing at all, but I might leave now. All right, Uncle, look, just take a seat. Drink your paracetamol there. All right.
Well, we managed to make it to episode. We managed to make it to episode 10 before we had your character work, so that's good. This is the Books Boys show. Get it? Buy it? Books.
Books. What's it all about?
Well, people know what the books are now because we've made it so long. I think they figured out that it's a readable paper subject with some words on it. I think people are getting it, you know?
Episode 10. It's taken 10 episodes. I'm still deeply confused of the moral nature.
I think I'm coming along as well. I mean, now I can read a book. I almost know all the letters. It's brilliant.
What? That's mad.
Almost know almost all the letters now. So it's great, you know?
That's mad.
Well, I thought we could mix up our order a little bit this month, PJ. Instead of me doing all my books and then you doing all your books, I thought since we've read 3 each, we could do like 1 and 1. We could take it in turns. Awesome,
let's do that, dude. Yeah, totally. Well, I'm very excited about the books I read this month. Let me tell you.
So am I, to be fair. Well, I'm excited about one of the 3 that I read. But we are joined. We're joined this month by little Cheap the bird on the webcam for no one to see apart from us.
Apart from us, I like it. Sweet.
And a little shout out to everyone on the TNC network and everyone listening on the radio, particularly in Oxford as well. So I'm going to start with my first book, PJ. I read. Right. Now, to be fair, I thought I was only going to read 1 book this month because my first book was The Count of Monte Cristo,
which is supposed to be a nice paperback thriller, right?
No, it's 1,200 pages. And it's a great book, and it is kind of a page turner, but it's slow going as well, just because of the sheer length. You know, it's almost just under 1,200 pages. It's by Dumas, who we've reviewed before with some of his Three Musketeers books. Gonna be honest, right off the bat, I need to say 2 things. This is an amazing book, but it's not as good as the Three Musketeers. So I'm just gonna say that straight away. No, it's a second. You know, it's good. It's just not quite there. It lacks some of the romanticism and the swashbucklery of the Three Musketeers. But
now some people love it more than Three Musketeers. Like
I mean a lot of people actually do, but for me, just not quite. And it was written at the same time, like the exact same time as the Three Musketeer trilogy. They were written like alongside each other. Yeah.
That's mad. Okay, so it's mixing universes and everything, or is it set in the same literary universe?
There's no references to make that clear. But it could be. You know, there's nothing to make it impossible either. You know, to give you the backstory, this is set during that period of time where the Emperor Napoleon had essentially been kicked out of France, but was trying to come back and did in fact make a brief comeback before being finally kicked out again by the royals. So that's the historical framework for this novel. Look, I don't want to give spoilers. We never give spoilers for the end. It's tricky with a book so long because I have to say something and I have to maybe go into it a little bit. I'll try not to give too much away. But to be honest, it's impossible to recap because there's just so many characters and there's so much going on. It's impossible to recap in 10 minutes, It
would take two episodes. I mean, we'd have to talk about for the next 2 months then.
I think so, yeah.
Wow.
So what we have is this chap, Edmond Dantes. And he's a naive little chap, and he's in love with a Catalan fisher woman girl thing. And that's grand as far as it goes. But then there's some mischievous chaps. So there's a guy, Danglers, who just doesn't like him for reasons unknown. Just doesn't like him. Okay. Then there's Cadmus, who's just, Danglers' sort of associate, and he doesn't particularly like him. He doesn't particularly dislike him either. He just kind of goes along with things. And then there's Fernand, who is in love with Dante's betrothed. So they, right at the beginning, they hatch a plot and basically say, let's get this guy in jail. Let's get rid of Dante's. So they get him put in jail. And of course, in this society, he's put in a dungeon, a dark dungeon for life with no trial. And that's it.
Right, okay.
So they say he's a supporter of Napoleon. Let's just get rid of him. Done. He does have a chance at survival. Sorry, go ahead.
No, again, there's like the theme of revenge, isn't it? That's very common in Dumas, Pérez novel too.
It is. There's a chap called Villefort who is the Procureur du Roi. So actually, he has the opportunity to... He's the legal boss, essentially. He has the opportunity to free Dante's or to at least look into it. But to protect his own career, he doesn't bother. Because it turns out the letter Dante's was about to deliver, unknowingly, was to Napoleon. And was... or to an advisor of Napoleon. And was was involved with Villefort's father, who was actually a traitor to the realm, essentially. He was a bad guy as far as his son was concerned. So to hush it up, he lets Dante just stay in jail, rot in prison. And no one thinks anything of it. They don't see him for 20 years or whatever. They think this guy's rotted in prison and died. But he makes friends with an abbé in prison. They burrow into each other's rooms, and this little deckhand learns so much from the abbé because he was a very learned man, and he teaches him everything. And he eventually escapes prison as a very, very highly educated person.
Right.
And with millions and millions and millions of wealth that the monk had hidden or knew about that it was hidden on the island of Monte Cristo. So Monte Cristo's not, it is an island, but there is no count of Monte Cristo. He just makes himself the count by being very rich and living on the island, essentially. But then it all gets a bit weird. That first part, up until now, that could almost have been a standalone book.
Okay.
And then we move into the second kind of sphere, which is, about 3/4 of the length. And what we have is all sorts of intricate stuff. So he no longer goes by Dante's, he goes by the Count of Monte Cristo. No one really knows his real name. He's just the Count of Monte Cristo.
So no one knows that this guy, so he just completely has hidden away his former identity. Does anyone know?
No, well, almost no. But he also has 2 other aliases. He's also Lord Winter and the Abbe Busconi. So when people say, like, who is this Count of Monte Cristo? Has he got any, credentials established? Oh, yes, he's a good friend of the Abbe Busconi. And,
right.
so he sets up his own credentials with, like, a series of false identities, essentially.
Clever. Nice.
And he has some servants. He has a female slave, Greek, called Haiti, but he doesn't treat her like a slave. He treats her almost like a goddess. Like, he is very, very good to her. Then he also has Ali and Bertuccio. Now, I don't want to get into massive details because, as I say, it's impossible. But basically what happens is there's these 2 chaps, Albert and Franz, that he befriends, these 2 young chaps, but they're suspicious of him. One of them, at least, is suspicious of him. And they're in Rome, and they're hanging around in Rome, and then they eventually say, let's meet the Count of Monte Cristo in Paris. We've got to bring it back to Paris, So they meet him there. He arrives, and there's so many characters it's difficult to say, but basically he sets out on a plot to get revenge on all the people who harmed him and who put him in prison. So that's Danglers, that's Fernand, that's Villefort. And he does this, but towards the end, he loses his own morality, and there's actually some soul searching that goes on. But there's also these amazing, massive Hollywood movie dramatic reveals each time he finally reveals his real identity to someone, and they're, in shock, quaking in their boots, because he goes through, he sets up these really intricate traps for them. And, but this man, they think he's a vampire at one point because he's like emotionless and cold, but, perfect, aristocracy, essentially, and very pale from his time in the dungeon as well. And they find it like his manners are impeccable. It's difficult to reproach him. But there's something just strange about this chap. And they just they don't know what to say. There's something weird about him.
And that attracts you, doesn't it? That whole kind of Dracula kind of.
Yes, it does. But guess what? This book is full of weird Victorian coincidences that make it a little bit hard to believe. Because once he gets in Paris, who does he make friends with? Well, Danglars is there, and he's now a baron, and he's doing very well. The Count de Morcerf, the father of Albert. Oh, hold on! It just turns out that that's Fernand, and Albert's mother is the Catalan that he fancied all those years ago. And she maybe recognizes him, but we're not sure. And then it just so turns out that Villefort is there, and that Franz is engaged to Villefort's daughter, Valentine. So everything's just coming together. And then it turns out that Madame Danglars and Villefort had an illicit love child, and they tried to kill the baby. And who would come in and rescue? Only Bertuccio, the servant. So there's just so many. And then that son grows up to be someone that the Count then meets and introduces to people. And there's just so many coincidences, and everyone knew everyone else, and no one knows who anyone else is. It's almost farcical at times.
Oh my God! Right, it's just like he's not really bothering too much with realism. All right, fair enough. Yeah,
but it's an amazing, amazing, amazing book. I can't fault it. I honestly maybe it could have been shorter, but
no, it sounds epic. I mean, it just sounds like. Why shorter? I mean, people nowadays watch like huge, long, Netflix series or whatever, or they watch The Wire seasons 1 to 980 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like long is good. Why not?
I suppose it is. It is, yeah. And I read this. It didn't take me a month in the end. It took me 15 days. So I did it in half the time I was meant to. Yeah. And there's bands of brigands, and there's all sorts. There's this bit where Albert's captured by brigands. And of course, the Count of Monte Cristo just happens to have influence over the brigands, so he can rescue him. He can do anything, this guy. You want anything done, he can just do it anywhere in the world, And the chap, this is amazing. This is the kind of character I love. He's rescued by he's captured by brigands. He doesn't care. He just goes in and goes to sleep. And everyone's like, well, normally people are begging and whatever and screaming. This guy just goes in calmly and goes to sleep. And they wake him up and they say, you're free. And he says, why have you woken me up? To tell you you're free, Your Excellency. He said, in the future, never awaken a man this early in the morning. I would still have been free in a few hours' time if you'd waited. He's just so relaxed, does not care.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's awesome. So it's got some real great characters, right?
It does. And there's this old guy, Noirtier, Villefort's father, who's old and disabled and cannot speak. But Valentine can communicate to him through a series of blinks and winks and, this kind of thing. It's insane, but you've got these really mean characters, like Villefort and Danglars. Some of the coincidences are a bit hard to come by, but he goes through his revenge, so beautifully. And there's a part at the end where he almost can't believe himself, and he's rich man, rediscover the poor man you were, free man, rediscover the prisoner, resurrected man, remember the corpse, because he's losing himself to revenge, and he actually almost doesn't recognize himself anymore.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I mean, I do love the theme of revenge. I mean, if you ever watched, for example, Park Chan-wook's Old Boy, it's a great Korean movie.
I have.
Exactly. It was a similar, not necessarily a similar story, but it's the same kind of thing where they trick someone and they prison him for years and take him away from his daughter, and then he just comes out seeking revenge. And I mean, obviously, you got the story 1,000 times in Hollywood or whatever, or Breaking Bad does a great example. But I mean, this must be one of the first real huge epic revenge until everyone's kind of like ruined.
I think it has to be
until you ruined yourself.
Yeah, there's only one other thing I want to say about it. There's another family called the Morels, and they're like the only good family in the book. Okay. And they were the ones who originally employed Dantes on the boat. And the dad's dead now, but he meets their son, and He does some mysterious things where he helps them out of a financial difficulty and saves the life of the father. And the father suspected it was Dante's, but didn't tell anyone. And we find out much, much, much later that he suspected it and told them before he died. And then, by mysterious coincidences, he ends up rendering the same assistance and preventing the son from committing suicide 20 years to the exact date that he prevented the father. There's a lot of this romantic coincidence going on.
Okay.
But they're the only people that think they recognize him. They think, there's something about this guy because they're good. And they're the only people who are not so self-absorbed as to not recognize someone whose life they ruined. These good people remember him, but they're not sure and they don't tell him, but they have a suspicion.
And tell me this, and their family name is Morales, right? So it's kind of like saying that they have morality in them.
Yeah, exactly.
And tell me this, though, it's written in the 40s, right? 1840s.
Yes, 1840s.
So, technically that would be a realist kind of era, but it sounds a very kind of romantic sort of novel.
Is. Dumas is too romantic. Even all the whole Three Musketeers books, they're full of romance. There's realist aspects, but no, the romance is bulging through, it
does sound like, a realist aspects might be, is it describing the society of the time pretty detailed, or is it not even bothering too much? Is it just bothering more on the revenge kind of theme?
There is a bit of, just because of the sheer length of the book, there's a lot of different scenes, so we do get to have a good look at that type of society, the rich Parisian opera going society. We almost get a little bit of Vanity Fair style where we see this kind of this rich society. So it is good to see that. But it focuses mostly on the it's a bit disjointed at times because there's just so much going on. It doesn't always flow as well as it could. But it all comes back, at the end, and it gets very addictive towards the end, And I love the big reveals and the big romantic parts,
Yeah, I love it. Sounds great. Yeah, love to read it. Talking about romanticism, you know what I read this month? Well,
I think I know, but let's have it from yourself.
Well, talking to Aleechea Pitts last month. And her love of the Alice books, the Alice in Wonderland books, made me realize, you know what, I should give it a try, because I have given it a try at least twice in my life and didn't get into it. So I got out my Alice Adventure in Wonderland book and started reading it. And I must say, I absolutely loved it. It's such a good book. This. I've talked to you about this before now throughout the whole month. That I just really love the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland book. So there are two books, guys. So first of all, there is Alice Adventures in Wonderland, which was published in 1865 by Lewis Carroll, whose real name was Charles Dodgson. I can't even pronounce his name. Charles Dodgson. So anyway, the story about Alice. She falls through a rabbit hole and she ends up underground, but really the underground world is just featured with a lot of talking animals and, kind of like two-dimensional card-like people. And really it's just, it goes into the category of literary nonsense. So Lewis Carroll just really enjoyed, he enjoyed rhymes and kind of children literature, but it's so absurd that it's not absurdism. It's just, what's the point of this? It's just, okay, it rhymes, like pie rhymes with tie or something like that. So if pie rhymes with tie and die, then he's just gonna somehow like form some kind of story with that, some kind of episode. Okay. And really, it's very episodic. I have to say, it's not really strong and like plot line. That's what I think.
Really?
No, I just don't find it's very strong plot line. There is a plot, but it's really just, at least the book, it really just goes from one episode to the next episode to the next, and it seems very random and disjointed, I have to say.
Right.
But I think the point of Alice in Wonderland is more, it's more about like this child's perception of, and that her fantasy becomes reality. And you're really not sure with the story if she's kind of just imagining it. And when you read both books, actually, you just think at the end, so did she actually dream it all? Did she imagine it all? Because it
maybe that's why it's disjointed then. Like a child's imaginings wouldn't have a coherent narrative necessarily,
Exactly. So it's a fascinating book for like a psychologist, like studying dreams, or especially a psychoanalyst. And yeah, this book was particularly popular by later on as well by psychoanalysts and other people interested in that. But I think that's a strong point. I think the strong point here is that Carroll managed to portray a child's imagination really accurately, maybe like the more accurately than anyone did before that. Not that it's the best and strongest children novel. You know my opinions about that. I still think Spyri's Heidi is the best children's novel for so many reasons, and it is. I think it's just a stronger book, but it doesn't mean that Alice of Wonderland is also a great book in a very different way, in the sense of this is a child's perspective. Heidi is just really a good story that can encourage you to be a better person. Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, there's no real morality, and there's not really a lesson, and there's not really a plot line, in my opinion. It just seems like he was just coming, just writing and coming along with a story as it goes. Saying that, though, this might interest you because you are the absolute expert in the subject of logic. University.
This is true. We studied logic together in university.
Yes.
Good callback.
Yes, I was the worst in the class. You were the best in the class.
Somehow, yeah.
And actually, Lewis Carroll was a mathematician, and he really knew a lot about logic. So it seems very interesting because this book seems very unlogical. So yeah, that's what I want to say. I want to add to that I read also the second book, Through the Looking Glass. Through the Looking Glass, excuse me, written in 1871. Now his dad died just before that. He wasn't really in contact with the real Alice. For those of you who don't know, Alice was based on a real girl, and she's already kind of like growing up at this point. Through the Looking Glass is a lot more melancholic. It's a lot more pessimistic. There's a darker theme in it. He plays a lot. There's this theme of cards in the first book, and in the second one is chess. And basically, through the Looking Glass, you go through to the next world, to the fantasy world, through a mirror. So it's always interesting. There's always these portals, basically, to these universe. I have to say, Through the Looking Glass might be even stronger in like this subjective state of like flowing to the next state. It's really it's a metaphor straight from the beginning that she's actually in a chess game, and that she really has no control over what she's doing, and she's just completely disjointedly going from one place to the next in order to become a queen. So she's a pawn, and she's going to become a queen. Now, in the film, in the Disney film, they mix both plots, but I
was going to ask you that because I've not read them, but I've seen the cartoon film. I was going to ask, is it based on both together?
I think it's based on both of them together, but I have to say it's been a while now since I saw it. But yeah, I think they mix both of them a lot.
Okay. So this is the stuff with the Queen of Hearts and the White Rabbit with the we're late for an important date and all that stuff, right?
Exactly, guys. So this basically to talk about the plot. Alice Adventure Wonderland is the one that you know better, probably. That she's following a rabbit, which goes down a rabbit hole, and the rabbit is late. And basically, Alice is falling down, entering this world. And in fact, she just kind of goes along with the flow, and she meets a lot of different animals that always give her a lesson. It's the same with Through the Looking Glass. So that's why I'm just mentioning now. I know we're supposed to mention one book at a time, but they're very much linked.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine if they're linked. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And basically, it's quite interesting. And now you got the Cheshire Cat. I've got to mention that.
Yes.
Who must be, it's really one of the best characters.
In the movie, I find him very creepy.
He is, and he's extremely creepy in the book as well. But yeah, it's fascinating because he just appears out of nowhere, and then he's smiling, and just the fact that a cat will be smiling, and he explains that he kind of, it's kind of sad because like he explains that he's smiling when he's unhappy, and he's when he looks unhappy, he's actually very happy. So he's actually not a very happy cat. So if he were at least a happy cat, but he's not. It's just and the whole universe is actually filled with very unlikable characters. I find, I would say, I don't really think they're. I think
Okay.
because when I, for example, wrote Okutama Express and I had a lot of animal characters, I can't help making them kind of likable, in my opinion. But in this case, it's kind of like they kind of represents a bad characteristic of humanity. So you've
Right.
got like the dodo and the white rabbit kind of like always rushing to get in time for somewhere. You've got oh my God, you've got the dodo, you've got the caterpillar who's just kind of it just seems to be an opium addict, in my opinion. But you got the Queen of Hearts and the King of Hearts, and you've got this aristocracy in there as well. And it's just basically the Queen of Hearts just wants to behead everyone, and then the King of Hearts has to excuse her behavior. It's mad. And there's the mock turtle as well. I find him an interesting character.
Is this for kids or is this good for adults to read? I think that's my only question, really.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely it's so much an adult read, definitely.
Okay.
And it's really relaxing, I find, to read it. It's just you get in, you read it one day, and it's you're left with an impression more than the story.
Okay.
And the same I can say with Through the Looking Glass. Now, Through the Looking Glass is even more adult focus. It's even darker. It's very pessimistic. I find even more. It's got even more bizarre characters. So there's a lot of, for example, there's Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
Yes.
And they're kind of just inseparable twins. But nevertheless, the fact that they love each other is also maybe not a healthy love because they also fight against each other and they can't be separated.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the White Knight, right? Was Leah mentioned? She
did the White Knight delivery service.
Escort service, yeah.
Escort service, yes. I was
And,
confusing that with Kiki's delivery service there.
Yeah, why not? Delivering pizza, right? Delivering pizza. And the White Knight is just, I mean, it's kind of funny. He's falling off onto his head and stuff, but there's also something kind of like sadomasochistic about the novel. I think it's a very bizarre sort of kind of universe he's created that's often very creepy, and there is a lot of controversy about his life and his sexuality, Lewis Carroll. So I mean, I do wonder about that in the novel, and stuff. And so anyway, that's
awesome.
Those are two books.
The big coincidence is that while you were reading these, I was in Oxford and I went to Alice's shop in Oxford at the same time you're reading. It was a weird coincidence.
Oh my God, that's crazy, yeah. Because I was really into it. I mean, I just thought, wow, amazing. Yeah, no, it's a great universe, very inspiring and creepy, definitely, and creepy, but also kind of like just enjoyable. It's a very strange mix and just really easy to read, I find. So definitely recommend both books. Just read them one after the other, and it's just awesome, yeah.
Okay. Well, what I'll do before we move on to our next ones is we'll have a quick message from our sponsors for this month. We have two sponsors. We have the Corporation for Shorter Podcast Episodes, which you can find at short. And it's helping us to keep our episodes concise and not 2 hours long. And also we have the Association for Picking a Pocket or Two, which we can learn all about, of course, in Oliver Twist. So those are our sponsors for this week. Or this month, I should say. But of course, we do also have our real sponsor, which is the Norwood Investing LLC. And I'll put a link again, but that's an investment center focusing on becoming more financially independent, courses on trading stocks and bonds and all that kind of stuff. And they do a 1-year deal. So I'll put some info and a link on that on the episode as well. And that's from Danny. He's a great guy. He's been supporting us for a while. PJ, just before we get to our next bit, I think I hear the telephone ringing. Let's just get on the line.
Okay.
Hey, you're through the Books Boys. You got Dean and PJ on the line. Who's calling?
Hey.
Cool. It's Liam, also known as Secondhand Bookman. So I just thought I'd bring in about a little-known story by Charles Dickens called George Silverman's Explanation. I don't know if either of you two are familiar with it.
No, I haven't heard of this.
I thought I had read, near enough the complete works of Dickens, but I don't know that one. I read all his novels. Wow. I read any short stories I could find, but I don't know that one.
Oh my God! All right, so you've got it. I'd love to hear it. Is that?
Yeah, I was quite defeated. I mean, I had never heard of this story until about 2 weeks ago when I just saw it in a bookshop. And when I put a review up of it online, I also had quite a lot of Dickens fans as well saying that they'd never heard of it either.
Wow.
Which is really bizarre considering the kind of story itself. I suppose just to kind of give you a bit of history about it, it was published in 1868, so it was about 2 years before Dickens died. And it was the last complete work of fiction that he wrote, and he was just paid an extraordinary amount of money for this story. I couldn't actually find out how much he was paid for the story itself, but in terms of the publication rights, he was approached by a chap named James Fields, who was the editor at the Atlantic America at the time. And he offered Dickens £1,000 for the publishing rights for it to be published in America before England.
Oh, that's a
for
lot
England.
Back then.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, £1,000 sort of back then in today's money, it works out to about 115 grand.
Wow, just to have it published in America.
And it's a really, yeah. I mean, that's literally just the publication rights. So I mean, I don't know how much he got paid on top of that either. And it's a really short story. I mean, it comes in at about 44 pages. I actually looked up the word count. It comes in at 11,000 words. So for the price he was paid just for publication rights, it basically worked out to about $2.5 grand per page he was getting paid for the story, or about £10 per word.
PJ, if we can get you paid that much for Okatama Express, you'll be doing quite well.
Yeah, if you can get that for mine, wow, that's an insane deal. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely ludicrous amount of money. And it's such an incredible story. I mean, which is why it kind of just baffles me that it just seems to fly under the radar. So many sort of Dickens fans, I suppose, because not only is it a brilliant story, it's the last piece of fiction that he completed, and he was just paid an obscene amount of money for it. But really short story, as I said, 44 pages. I mean, I don't know how kind of in depth you want me to go with the story in terms of spoilers. I mean, do you want me to just kind of really unpack it?
Our general rule is never spoil the ending, but you can kind of, talk about the first kind of half to 2/3, And
I'd love to hear about the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Okay. Well, I'll keep the ending under wraps then.
Please.
I mean, it starts off, immediately it just feels really familiar as a Dickens story. Opens up with George Silverman himself, as a child living in this kind of squalid, damp cellar in Preston, really unhappy childhood, and ends up being orphaned. So immediately there's that kind of
it's hitting all the tropes right away.
Yeah, stereotypical Dickens.
Pretty much. And he kind of leads this kind of really miserable life, even when his parents are alive. They treat him really harshly. He keeps being accused of his mother of being sort of too worldly and wanting too many things. Even when he's just asking for food and warmth. So he's living in this kind of it's horrific. He's kind of existing in this sort of purely kind of animalistic state, I suppose. And his parents both end up dying of fever, and he gets rescued from the cellar. A clergyman who has a fantastic name, Charity Hawkyard. And again, there's quite a few names in the story, like typical Dickens, just really fantastic names.
Yeah.
So he's kind of rescued by this clergyman, and is sort of educated and sort of brought up in this quite religious environment, and really doesn't like it. And sort of throughout the story, he's basically living with this really sort of ingrained sense of and shame, really, due to kind of just being locked up for most of his life and just sort of the way his parents treated him. He just has almost no self-esteem. He just looks down on himself and just considers himself, the worst person in the world. The kind of children who he's kind of brought up with, they sort of invite him to parties and he turns them down because he just doesn't feel like he's good enough, and he just really just sort of isolates himself and just sort of sabotages his kind of chance at happiness, really. Every time that sort of option comes along, he just blows it out of the water, really.
Okay, so he's slightly different than the, it sounded like the orphan story. It's the same as Oliver Twist. It's the same as Great Expectations, David Copperfield. But actually, most of them, they're looking for a happy ending. It sounds like maybe this guy's not really even looking for a happy ending.
Yeah, pretty much. He's kind of just completely alone as well. I mean, there's no sort of Joe Gargery figure like you get in Great Expectations.
Right.
Someone to kind of like, really sort of coddle him and bring him up. So he's just kind of dealing with all the stuff himself. Eventually becomes an adult and sort of goes off to university or college to get educated. And continues to kind of carry this guilt around with him until he's approached by quite a wealthy woman and she wants him to educate her daughter. Okay. And he falls in love with the daughter. She falls in love with him as well.
Oh.
And
mercy.
I won't, kind of say what happens at the end, but it is quite a sort of sad story. It is sort of missing that kind of classic, sort of like typical kind of happy ending.
Yes,
that you
standard Dickens ending
is absent.
Oh no! So because in most Dickens novels, just no matter how sad it gets, they all get married and live happily ever after in the end. So it's a shame if we don't get that actually.
It sounds very existentialist and modernist. Actually, it doesn't sound like a Dickens novel. It sounds like something, I don't know, like Gorski would write or something like that, or Dostoevsky.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, it's bizarre because the sort of story exists in sort of two camps. Where, like, on the one hand, it really does feel like really familiar as a Dickens story. You kind of got those classic tropes. You've got the kind of fantastic names and things like that. But then, on the other hand, it doesn't have that happy ending. One of the most notable things that's missing from it is humour. It's not particularly funny, which is quite strange.
So I think Dickens lost his humour near the end. I think his last couple of works, they don't have that humour of his early stuff. It's quite sad actually.
It is such a shame. I mean, I did manage to kind of track down a quote by Dickens when he went back and read this kind of short story, and he said himself that it feels like someone else had written it, like it's fallen out of someone else's head. Really? So it's kind of bizarre. It's sort of really kind of Dickensian on one hand, but it's also kind of missing a lot of the kind of typical things that you'd expect to find in a Dickens story.
I have just one question for you because of its length. Does it read like a real short story, or does it read like a plan for a novel? Is it what he could have turned into a full novel, or is it very clear that it was always just going to be a short story?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I really wish it was a novel. As I said, it's about 44 pages long, and I just sort of wish it was about 444. There's kind of so much potential. There's basically just so much potential in there to kind of explore the character, and a lot of kind of stuff in his life does get skipped over quite quickly. But I mean, it still does feel like a short story. It is still enjoyable. It's kind of very tight. There's not a kind of like wasted word or a syllable in it.
Well, hey, if I was getting paid $2,000 per page, I would not be wasting any words.
Well, this is the sort of common criticism you find. When people talk about Dickens, they always say he was paid by the word, so he just stretched everything out and everything becomes sort of so flowery, which I've never agreed with personally. I just never thought that, Great Expectations could have benefited from, taking a single word out of that novel. It's just
some of them could though. You could cut a little bit out of Bleak House. I think that's that doesn't need to be 800 pages and very little happens in it. That could be cut a little bit.
Well, our joke is that's fair enough.
I'll tell you that.
Our joke is that he took the Anna Karenina method, which was a best-selling method to make big, huge novels. So you have like a short story, and then you just put an agricultural manual around it. So I think that he was kind of going for that Tolstoy method.
So if it feels like Anna Karenina gets a mention in every one of your episodes about it.
I just had to mention it. It was on my agenda to mention it. So.
Man, thanks so much for calling in. Let's plug your Instagram. Yeah. It's Secondhand Bookman. And you're doing book reviews on there?
Yeah, Secondhand Bookman. Pretty much, Secondhand Bookman, all just sort of one word, all lowercase.
Sweet. Yeah. And I love your mission. So it seems like you're going, like, what I get from that, but you can correct me though. what I get from that is that you go to secondhand bookshops, or you search for books that are unknown and then bring them back to life. Can we say? Is that what you do?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite similar to Dean in the sense that 99% of my book shopping is done in secondhand bookshops.
With us too. Like, we love that. So
we love that. Yeah.
It's great.
Secondhand bookshops are just these kind of these magical.
Actually, my
places.
confession is that the bookshop that I always talk about going to, like PJ introduced me to that shop. I didn't even know that shop before, so that's PJ's gift to me actually.
There you go, the magic bookshop we call it. Yeah.
Well,
next time you're in Belfast,
next time you're
in Belfast, we'll meet up and go there and excavate.
Awesome.
Take your shovel.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, man.
Brilliant.
Awesome, dude.
Wow.
Yeah.
So PJ, that was pretty cool. We had Secondhand Bookman calling in. You can check him out on Instagram, and we learned some stuff about some unknown Dickens.
Yeah, that was really interesting. My God. And yeah, I really liked the way he told this story. I mean, that was really interesting about finding this unusual book.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of it, so.
Nor had I. He's a cool guy, and we're going to hear from him again because he's gonna co-host Caper Captains with us this month.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Let's mention that we have every month Caper Captains, which is our murder mystery, our Agatha Christie mini episodes, and we set out the plot. And normally I set out the plot, and you guess who done it. But while we're on that theme, guys, if you go to patreon.com/booksboys, you can get all of our bonus shows. We recently released Film Fellows episode 2, where we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street. We've got interviews from the vault, where I've done decade-old interviews with rock stars and musicians. We've got Playboys, our Shakespeare reviews, and we're going to try to get a few more of those done soon. There's a lot of stuff on there, guys, and it's only £2.50, €2.50, or $3 per month, and that's amazing. It's very cheap. It's so cheap that we're almost paying you to take it. We're
almost paying you.
If it gets any cheaper, we'll be paying you.
Exactly. I mean, any cheaper, I'll be giving you money from my pockets just to open your ears. Yeah.
But if you want to support us, that's a great place to do it. Patreon.com/booksboys. There's 2 ways that you can support us for free, though. Give us a good iTunes review if you listen on iTunes. That's an easy thing to do. Or if you're on the Spotify's, listen to our albums. I've got my album out, A Dozen Most Listenable, and we've got our joint album, A Decade of Friendship. Those are both up there on the Spotify, and all you got to do is listen. And every time you listen, we get a fraction of a penny. And if we get enough people listening in about 10 years' time, we'll be able to... In about 10 years' time, we can afford a subscription to our own Patreon. So that's a measure of success,
Exactly, guys. So just support us. 1 penny is better than half a penny, right? Can't do much with half a penny. So we need a few half pennies.
That's it. So those albums are on Spotify, and there's links to everything, of course, on booksboys.com. And we still have our mystery book giveaway. So if you'd like to win a mystery book, just email booksboys@hotmail.com. Tell us what you're reading. Just a couple of lines. That's all we need. PJ, the second book I read this month is, I'm going to show it to you here. It's by Johann Hari, Lost Connections. So following on from the meditation book I got last month, I thought I would try something along the same lines. It's Lost Connections, Why You're Depressed and How to Find Hope. There's not a lot to say about it because, it's not a plot-based book. But the guy does some searching into what causes depression. The chap himself was depressed in the 80s, and he was basically told, well, your brain's broken, take antidepressants for the rest of your life. Next. And that was it. So then he says, well, that can't be right. And he spends so the book's essentially split into 3 parts. The first part is just introductory. There's 2 main parts. One of those is disconnection. So that's him looking like what is causing disconnection. Why are we feeling depressed and anxious? And it's, disconnection from meaningful work, from other people, from meaningful values, childhood trauma. And he goes through it kind of various different causes. And throughout this book, and you can see this on the lostconnections.com, throughout the book, he cites a lot. It's written quite lighthearted, and bits of it, he almost writes it like a story. But then there's references to interviews with scientists and with psychologists and people working in the field. And they're all properly cited and referenced at the back of the book, and all the interviews are available to listen to online. So it's a scientific study, but it's written quite lighthearted, almost like a novel at times, to make it more engaging. That's why he's an international bestseller. It's not a journal, But the second half then is the ways to reconnect. reconnecting to other people, to meaningful work, meaningful values. And there's a lot of stuff about community. And he thinks that basically the way we live today, very, very, very isolated, very selfish, and working, boring jobs. And that's really not helping us as a society. And, doing volunteer work and getting involved with the community and nature and this kind of stuff, he thinks are essentially a cure for that,
I like it.
Is a great quote. Materialism is KFC for the soul. So like this materialist capitalist world is junk food for your soul, essentially.
Awesome. I like it.
I think it's an easy to read book because it doesn't read like a scientific journal, despite the fact that there is a lot of evidence quoted in it. It makes it quite easy to read. And he talks a lot about his own experiences and also about the experiences of other people. But again, it's always backed up by studies. But one, his big point is basically, there was a time when we had rich communities, and now we have people who nod to each other and then close their door. And the Western world is full of disconnection, and it's basically why we're disconnected and then how we can reconnect. And I find it quite peaceful and quite enjoyable to read and helpful, actually.
Great. So it actually motivated you. It actually brought you up.
I think so. Yeah, I definitely would. If anyone is, thinks that would be helpful to them, or even, just a pure interest on depression, even if you're not depressed yourself and you're just curious. It's a short book. It's only about 300 pages. I think I read it in a week, and I think that anyone could read it quite accessibly. It's quite an enjoyable read, actually, as well.
It's a big theme with me at the moment. I mean, I'm also investigating about how to, I wouldn't say cure depression, but how to transform depression into self-love and positivity. So, wow, I'd love to read that book, definitely. Does he mention at all Blue Zones or Dan Buettner's work? Did he ever mention that in the book?
I don't. There's dozens and dozens of references. I can't remember offhand.
I'm sure he does, because Dan Buettner is just he's kind of a reporter. He's kind of a madman, actually. He's kind of a reporter and a cyclist, and just kind of like investigate and explore everything together. Right. And he came up with his Blue Zones concept in an article called "The Secrets of a Long Life." And basically, Blue Zones are these communities around the world. There are only like 5 he identified, in Okinawa, in the Icaria in Greece, Sardinia in Italy, a community in California, and a community in Nicaragua. And basically, what these communities have in common is that they are very socially active with one another. And a scientist actually proven that distancing yourself, feeling disconnected, just nodding to your neighbor, then isolating at home, actually reduces your life expectancy. So if you just have a strong social connection to your neighbors, then you can actually increase your lifespan. As well as that, he also talked about a largely plant-based diet, a slower pace. So all of these communities, they actually just do everything slower, and also that they have a sense of purpose, so that everyone knew exactly what they're doing. Engagement, spirituality, there are different takes, there are different kind of reasons. But I just find it interesting I mentioned that. So like social connection and also distance is extremely important, even though we have a tendency to say we want to isolate ourselves.
Yeah. I should say that, in investigating this, he speaks to dozens of people and he travels the world. He says, well, let's see how the Amish live. Let's go to somewhere across the world. Let's find a community who were living where the Berlin Wall was and hear their story about how, when the Berlin Wall came down, the area they were living in went from being, essentially a trouble zone to being prime real estate. So they, tripled their rent and they couldn't afford to live there anymore. And all this kind of touching stories about immigrants and gay communities that were both marginalized coming together and making a community and helping each other. There's a lot of really touching stories in it,
Wow, I'd love to read it, yeah.
So it's very, very good. Have you got one more?
Before that, guys, I just want to mention that if you actually are interested in that, you can join the Holy Wholesome Life on Facebook, as well as Yang Morning Meditation with PJ. So this is something I do with my partner, Lisa Fox, which is basically helping people with depression and turn that into self-love through plant-based nutrition. So if you want to check us out on Facebook, Mastermind, and YouTube.
Cool.
And yeah.
And
What
in the other projects section on booksboys.com, there is a link to the Holy Wholesome Life. By the time the episode goes out, I'm going to try to get a link to your YouTube channel as well, so that everyone can just easily access that as well.
Thank you very much. And we always just provide free information and help. So feel free if you just want to join hands.
By the way, before you get into your book, I have a quick addendum, PJ. I've been made to apologize because last month I said, when I got Trafalgar, the guy gave it to me for free because I bought so many other books in Galicia. Well, actually, I didn't buy a single book. Valerie the Pigeon Detective bought all of those books. So I've just been asked to clarify that I didn't pay for a single book myself on that trip.
All right, okay, it's on record right now. Thanks, Valerie the Pigeon Detective. We appreciate your engagement, and she's basically sponsoring us, right? And that's basically she's our sponsor.
Yeah.
She paid
half
for
a dozen books, more than that, actually, probably a dozen books so far.
Yeah.
So, PJ, what's your last book?
Well, being obsessed with Alice, I had to read this here. I'm showing it to you. Automated Alice. Now, Automated Alice is a trequel to the two books of Alice, and it's written by Jeff Noon in, I believe, 1998, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a trequel? Well, no, what's that?
It's a 1996 book, excuse me. A trequel is basically just a kind of fancy word for a third book. So not a sequel, but kind of a,
right, okay. You were getting too hipster for me there.
I was getting very
an old man.
It's an old man's soul in a young man's body. That's what you are. And basically, Jeff Noon is kind of like this young Brit pop kind of author from the 90s. So he's kind of postmodern. He's a bit of a hipster himself, I suppose. So, but anyway, so Jeff Noon, who's largely based in Manchester most of his life, wrote a series of kind of science fiction novels, kind of postmodern science fiction novels. First one being Vort, and the next one being Poland in the 90s. And then he decided to write the third book to that series, while also making it the third book for the Alice books series. So he kind of decided to link his own kind of universe to the Alice in Wonderland universe. And he wrote this book, which is basically supposed to have been written in 1890 by a dying Lewis Carroll, who's just kind of like mourning the days of hanging around with Alice at the Thames Bank,
Okay.
And basically, I think I'm getting very awkward here because it's just, because whenever I think about Lewis Carroll and, anyway, guys, so Lewis Carroll, did he fancy the little girl Alice? I don't know. That's a creepy subject for another time for a horror show.
Right.
But that's why I was kind of like, where's it going? Was that anyway? We won't go down there. We won't go down that rabbit hole. Tell you that. We're just going to say that it's pretty awesome. It's actually this time she goes through the clock's workings. So I really like it. It's actually Alice visiting her uncle and aunts, and the parrots of the uncle and aunts flies into the clockwork. It's kind of left open, but as soon as she goes inside the clockwork, she climbs in. She climbs up, and all of a sudden she is in 1998.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so she's moved up. So it's kind of crazy, yeah. So she's moved to Manchester of 1998, and it's basically not even a sort of modern Manchester. It's kind of like a parallel Manchester where everyone's infected by a disease, where they are half human, half animal, or half human, half object. And basically, she's carried a doll with her that she doesn't call it Alice. She calls it Celia. But actually, they're the same letters, just put into different places. So Alice, Celia. And the doll in this parallel universe in 1998 has actually become a live sort of kind of robotic being, basically an automated Alice. And she kind of has a soul because there are termites in her brain, making her active. It's a very surreal novel. All right. And that's the whole point of it. I have to say, Jeff Noon, if anything, did a fantastic job of replicating Lewis Carroll's language, because it has a very distinctive style of reading, a distinctive style of writing. So it was just amazing, I have to say. It's stuff like, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, cried Alice. Whatever shall I do? Great aunt is early for my lesson. I really must find Whippoorwill, the parrot. He must be around somewhere. And so Alice climbed up the pendulum even further until with a sudden ellipsis, ... Alice vanished. Now, I don't know if you have ever vanished, but if you have, you will know it can be quite a fearsome experience. And that's a very Lewis Carroll style of writing. And I have to say, I really love this book. It's basically set in chapters that are that goes clockwise. So there are 12 chapters, and it ends with 12 o'clock. And it's just basically her trying to find the parrot and trying to find Celia, who disappears, and trying to find, for some bizarre reason, she's trying to find the lost puzzle pieces to her puzzle. So there are 12 pieces. For some reason, she's obsessed with that. And that's kind of similar to Lewis Carroll in the sense of like, why is this? It's kind of absurd. Like, why would this girl obsess about that? But she does ultimately want to return to 1860 to her lesson because she thinks she's going to be late to her lesson. So again, it's a bit of a parallel to the White Rabbit saying, she's going to be late to her lesson. And there are constant references to both Alice books. But I have to say, the more further on it goes, the more Jeff Noon language appears, more than Lewis Carroll, and is making a conscious shift to a more modern language. And Alice starts to talk like a modern person, and even the writing stuff becomes different. And it's really surreal, including scenes like being swallowed by a huge snake, and then landing on an office with a perfect man, giving her the choice of entering 3 doors to three different Manchesters. It's mad, right? It's just mad. I don't need to go too much into the plot detail because it's so detailed, but it's great. May I even say, very controversially, I might have even enjoyed it even more than the original Alice books. Yeah. So this is a really good book, which some people don't expect, right? When you use it's kind of like fan fiction, why would you write, why would you just take someone else's universe and then whatever, and then turn in your own thing? Now, I have to say, the best sequence in the book for me, because it's the most philosophical sequence, is when the author Jeff Noon himself appears in the book, and that's truly postmodernist.
That's very strange.
People don't usually like that. I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, they don't like when," because it's been done by Paul Auster, for example. Like a few postmodernist authors, guys, 80s onwards, they kind of started doing that. But I thought he did it very subtly and very beautifully, because he doesn't call himself Jeff Noon, but he clearly is Jeff Noon because he plays around with the idea of his surname being Noon. So his name is in the book Zenith O'Clock, or Zenith O'Clock. And it's just basically, it's got one of the most beautiful phrases ever, I think. It's just basically, it's 12 o'clock in the universe, and it's the only moment of peace in the whole story. So it's like very chaotic the whole time. And he just appears for a second, and he says, let's have a look here. He just gives her courage and just says, come on, Alice, everything's going to be okay. And then the quote is, Alice wanted to ask what he meant, but just then the town hall clock reached the 12th of its slowed down ding-dongs, and the writer's hand came down to stroke once again on Alice's pinafore shoulder. It was noon. It was the very softest of touches, the breath of friendship amid strangers, and then he was gone. And I just want to finish that the next chapter is actually Alice has to look up herself in the library and has to read her own story in order to find the missing clue to.
So we're getting very meta.
Very meta. So I'm going to leave it as that, guys, but read it. It deserves more praise. Jeff Noon's Ultimated Alice, and it actually plays around with the concept of who is the real Alice. which gets confusing. Is it Celia or is it Alice? Because they think they might have confused their bodies. So the puppet starts to think she's the real one, or Alice starts to think she might be robotic. So it's great.
Before I get on to my last book, PJ, we've got a serious problem. When people go to patreon.com/booksboys, they're paying to get not only our bonus shows, but they're paying to get this show early. And that's the Bufanda Boys. You get the show a day early, and in that early recording, we re-record the show word for word in the past, and we wear scarves. But PJ, you're wearing a scarf right now.
Oh no!
I think we're swindling people. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know.
They'll need their half pennies back because I'm wearing a scarf. Actually, I'm wearing. Oh, well, this sounds a bit seductive. Make sure to cover your children's ears, but I'm wearing very little. I'm wearing just underpants and a scarf. So,
okay, well, I can only see your upper body, so we're okay. Yeah. I think.
It's my new look, Dean. Have you noticed that in the Yang morning meditation? It's just shirtless, kind of. Yeah. I've gotten some feedback about that where I should wear a t-shirt. I'm just kind of
you got feedback to put more clothes on. Yeah, you're like a kind of you're now repelling clothes. Like it's physically impossible for you to put them on now. Like you just. But guys, we actually had a comment on social media. Someone contacted. I asked what people's favorite Jane Austen book was because, as you know, on the previous few episodes, I've been reviewing some, and I'm going to pick that up again next month.
I just want to say, I love your reviews of books lately. The ones I've been watching. They're on TikTok and YouTube, right? I mean,
TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. They're everywhere. I've been watching on YouTube. I'm a social media little millennial guru now. I know all the things. I'm twerking and everything,
I really appreciate that, doing that for us. Thanks first of all, I want to say to you.
No worries.
For the great job you've done for both of us. Thanks, man.
So I asked someone, we did a poll and we've decided I've got 2 Jane Austens to do, and I'm only going to do one of them next month. Not Emma, but Mansfield Park. But I asked what people's favorite was from the ones we'd already reviewed. And the Historian Chronicles on Instagram said their favorite was actually Persuasion. That's the one that I reviewed last month, and I did not like. That's my least favorite. But their reason is, I'll read it here. It's only 2 sentences. The book falls into a more mature stage of her writing. It was probably meant to be longer. We do know that it was never completed. It was published, posthumously. But it's more mature writing. The characters are moving from the initial tropes of Pride and Prejudice and sensibility. Where they're all quite similar characters. Now the main characters are older, and she reaches the reader having already found herself as a person. And that is something that really only happens in Persuasion, to be fair. Captain Wentworth and Anne's 8 years of mutual affection shows not only a very interesting dynamic, but a more dedicated step into the changing mentalities of the 19th century. Nothing that's said there is untrue. I just found it to be the most boring of the books so far, but Northanger Abbey is still my favourite, but we'll do Mansfield Park next month, and we'll see. So we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and we're going to have an ad for another great podcast.
Ever wonder where Disney got his inspiration for Snow White? Or why Hans Christian Andersen decided to write The Little Mermaid? Then join me, Jessica Clinch, on the Forgotten Origins podcast, where I discover the grisly truth behind the forgotten origins of fairy tales.
Okay, and before I review my last book, PJ, I don't know if you remember, I told you this last month, I did an Odyssey review. That's coming out in middle of August. It was a crossover with the Well That Aged Well history podcast, 45 or so minutes where we review just specifically Homer's Odyssey. So that's going to be out, and again, you'll get it first on Patreon, but it will be put up for free on the main feed as well. So PJ, my last book, I went for more Galdós, more Benito Pérez Galdós,
nice.
Misericordia. No, I should say it's not a long book. It's only about less than 300 pages. I haven't finished this. I've got about 30 pages to finish tomorrow, but I've read enough to review. Certainly I enjoyed it more than Trafalgar, let's say that. I liked it, but I didn't love it. You've got a little bit of that Dickens world, with the poverty, that Flaubert kind of style. I don't know. I read it in Spanish, and I mean, I read all the Zafon books in Spanish, and I didn't struggle at all. I find it very hard to focus on this book. I don't know if the language was a little bit older, or I mean, one thing I didn't like. There's not a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of narrative, and if you remember from my Gulliver Travels review a few months ago, that's something I find quite tedious. Lots of narrative. I prefer to skim the narrative and focus on dialogue. So I think I find that quite difficult. But it is a good book. You know, Misericordia means mercy, and that's a pun because it's about showing mercy, but also the Mercy Hospital in Madrid. So it is set in Madrid, and so Benina is the main character, and she's a servant for Doña Paca. Have you read this one, by the way?
Yes. I really enjoyed this one. So so we can talk about this one together. I mean, this one was a requirement for school, but I even read it before because I'm a big fan of Galdós. But I understand what you're going for. You say first what you think of it. I have some reason.
I want to say I did like it. I don't want to give the impression that I didn't like it. I just didn't love it. You know, and I think I just need more dialogue. I think that's the only thing. I skim, even in authors that I like, such as Dickens. I tend to skim the narrative and look for dialogue. But I mean, look, Benita's going around. She's meeting people in the street. She's helping people. She's a kind soul. She's doing kind deeds for people, even though she's poor. And her mistress, Doña Paca, who maybe used to be rich, is also now poor. So she's begging, alms in the street, but not actually telling her kind of boss that that's what she's doing. She's saying that the money comes from a reverend, essentially, and but she invents this fake kind of minister who's giving the money, and who's maintaining them. And some of the people she speaks to, there's this one guy who's trying to tell her that everything will be sorted through some kind of magical, mysterious means, and the king under the earth and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, we also have the African guy who loves her, even though she's like double or triple his age, and wants to bring her back to Africa, where his family are apparently wealthy. Right. So there's all that kind of stuff going on as well. And she's like, "Look, I'm basically your granny here. Like, I'm not gonna run away with you." And she doesn't want to. She wants to let him down slowly, and all that kind of stuff's going on. And then all of a sudden, the fake reverend that she invents actually materializes and tells Doña Paca, "Well, no, we do have money. I've got someone's, left you an annuity or inheritance, something like that. You do have a lot of money now." But there's this sadness, this Flauberian sadness, or maybe Balzacian sadness. It's sad what happens to Benina, because she doesn't really. So far, and again, I haven't quite finished it, but it doesn't look like she's going down for a happy ending here, and that's sad.
Well, it is very sad. And asking for alms, pedir limosna in Spanish is the phrase that I most clearly remember because it just repeats itself. It's
in there a lot, yeah. But without a license, begging without a license. I mean, how irresponsible! You starving people, get the paperwork in order,
or at least read some Benito Pérez Galdós.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it that she eventually gets in legal trouble for begging without a license, and loses her position. It's insane.
Look, I have to say this first of all to put into context. This is a late novel of Benito Pérez Galdós. Trafalgar was more of a young, immature novel, I would say as well. And basically, he's really getting into naturalism, guys. So naturalism is the next step from realism, where naturalisms actually criticize realists for not being realistic enough. I know it's a bit ironic, but naturalists are basically trying to describe the natural state of things, which is quite gruesome. Because realists are more concerned about the portraying a society as if it were portraits, but nevertheless kind of embellish certain things and not tend not to focus too much on the very, very low or marginalized classes. So Benito Pérez Galdós starts doing this when he reads Émile Zola, who's kind of the father of naturalism, and this like in the late 1880s, but more like 1890s. And Benito Pérez Galdós was a big fan of Balzac, uses a lot of humor in his early novels, just like Balzac. It doesn't really get too much into the Balzac sadness. I feel like Balzac has both. but the Balzac sadness and that gritty Zola hyperrealism or naturalism gets into his later novels, and he starts becoming more of a student of Zola, and he starts talking more about really sort of marginalized people, really tragic in a gritty sense, because when he started writing, they were more tragic in a romantic sense. Now, I have to say, I prefer his early romantic novels, which there's not Trafalgar. It's for example, Marianella and Donna Perfecta. Those are the novels you should look out for. Shorts.
Yeah, I need to get Donna Perfecta.
And they've got very unrealistic settings. Like, I don't mean unrealistic settings. They got very kind of not too kind of, what's the word? They're not really too typical settings. Like Marianella is set in the countryside, and it's idyllic, and she's kind of helping a blind man, and they're in love. But when the blind man begins to see again after an operation, love breaks down because Marianella is not very pretty. That's more of a romantic story I love. So I just want to say, go for those novels. But I enjoyed Misericordia, but I agree with you. It's not quite as gripping, maybe even as Père Goriot, which is also very sad and realist. But that's.
Am I going to get more dialogue in his in Donna Perfecta?
You will love Donna Perfecta. It's the kind of thing you would enjoy. Yeah?
Okay.
And
well, I was going to move on to our. Go ahead.
You can also get Misericordia. I think it's just called Mercy. And there's one edition in English.
Well, you don't read it in Spanish. Don't make it too easy for them. We're teaching them about books, but we don't have to be easy.
So you have to read in Spanish as well. Okay.
Because do you know why? I said at the beginning, I'm getting better at reading. I've almost learned all the letters. But if you do it in English, it's too easy. You do it in Spanish, boom, you've got like ends with accents and everything. Don't make it too easy. They learn the letters and suddenly there's more. Don't make it too easy for them.
Exactly.
But we're going to move on to our recommendations. But just a second. I think I hear the phone ringing for a second time.
What?
So PJ, if you just bear with me, I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'm going to see who's on the line. Get yourself a cup of tea.
Okay. Yeah, I will. Yeah.
Hey, so we have a call live in on the show. Why don't you tell us who you are, and we'll see what we can ask you.
Hello, my name is Rev Aleeceha Pitts. I am a 5-time author, Christian speaker, and mentor. And I always like to tell people this: many gifts, but much responsibility.
Many gifts, but much responsibility.
Yes.
That sounds about right. And how do you cope with that responsibility? You just do your best?
I do my best, manage my time. And I always say it like this: when you do what you can, God can do what you can't do.
Okay, fair. So how long have you been a pastor?
I've been a pastor since 2003.
And the books that you've written, are they all during that time?
No, it's different spans. And actually, the last 3 books that I've written are within the last 2 years.
Right. So you're getting more into it at the moment. Is that a plan that you have going forward, just to keep writing a bit more nowadays?
Yes. What ended up happening, I had wrote 2 books previously, over a decade or so ago, actually almost about 20 years ago. And then what ended up happening, the first book, the book that I've written in 2018 was Let It Go for Your Sake, Forgive. There's another way to live. Keep going back to love. And that book came out of a conversation. It was birthed out of a conversation. I was an adjunct professor of a leadership institute, and the chancellor of the school, she said, "You always talking about forgiveness. Why not write about it?" And so that's how the book, Let It Go for Your Sake, Forgive, came into play.
Mm-hmm. That was the one that I'd seen, online, and the one that kind of got me interested in speaking to you.
Correct.
So, give us obviously without going into too much detail about the book, because we want people to read it, but give us a brief kind of synopsis. What's the benefits for ourselves of letting things go and of offering that forgiveness?
Well, it's for your sake that you let it go, right? You have people that are holding on to things for 20 and 30 years. And there comes a point in your life where you have to move from being a victim to a victor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And would you say that that's, more important or equally important as, letting it go for the sake of maybe the person that you're not forgiving? Do you think that it affects both people, or?
More than likely it does affect both people, but even if it doesn't affect the offender, it is for your sake that you let it go. I like to say it like this because sometimes people have done things to you, but they're not studying you. They're sleeping at night and you all discombobulated and all, upheavaled in your feelings. So this is why you have to let it go. It's not even about you even really focusing on the other person at that point.
Yeah, the other person might have completely moved on a long time ago and you're the one with that pent up emotion. Yeah, that's a fair point. And are you working on anything at the moment?
Not currently. Actually, I'm working on an online course that will be coupled with the forgiveness book. As I told you, within this last year, I dropped 2 books. My most recent book is called Memoirs of a Pastor, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'm not perfect. I'm only human. It is a very inspirational book, and there are many nuggets and many takeaways that you can take from my memories or my process of different times in my life when it comes to that book. Let me put it this way. God told me to start with the bad. The bad are things that I had no control over. The ugly is decisions that I've made in my life. And then the good is where I am right now.
Okay, so it's kind of your journey from that starting point to where you've got to.
Yes.
Very good. And let's ask a question to go a little bit away from your own works, but I ask this to everyone we interview. Obviously, most of us have dealt now with almost a year of kind of lockdown. Have you increased what you've been reading yourself? Have you done some reading in the last year?
Yes, I'm constantly reading. I'm a bona fide teacher anyway, so I love to learn. I love to read. So I read all different kinds of commentary, different kinds of devotions, things of that nature.
Awesome. And there's one question that I love to ask everyone. If there's one work that you could have written, one classic work that you could have written, can be anything, can be a novel, can be a nonfiction, can be whatever you want, textbook, anything. There's one thing that you that's always had an impact on you and you wish, I wish I had written that. What would that be?
Well, the truth of the matter is there's really no new information. And Dr. Miles Monroe, he says it best. He says there's no new information. It's just a different experience, right? Like my forgiveness book. There's plenty of forgiveness books out there. Those forgiveness books just doesn't have my experience. So I really can't even answer that for you at this point.
I caught you off guard with that. But no, you make it.
Well, you know what? Actually, it just came to me. I would say a poetry book.
Really?
Yes, because I do write poetry as well.
Ah, okay. My co-host PJ, now he's actually a poet and he writes a lot of poetry and he's trying to look into getting some of it published. So that's quite a good coincidence.
Okay.
Do you have a poem? I mean, I haven't asked you to prepare this, but do you have one ready that you could read for us?
If you give me one brief second, I can pull it up right quick. Let's see. Okay, so this, just to show you how long ago it's been since I've written something sooner than this, but this is an old poem. I wrote this poem. At this time, I actually was an evangelist at this time, back on December 29th, 2004. And it's called Crossroads. And it says, everyone comes to a crossroad in his or her life, especially those who live in the nightlife. You feel like a rat trapped in a corner, unlike the nursery rhyme of Little Jack Horner. A decision has to be made, whether good or bad. The results of your decision can make you happy or sad. Within yourself, you already know what to do. Follow your conscience. Therein is your breakthrough. Choose you this day whom you will serve. The flesh doesn't want you to observe. This is the Lord's doing. Can't you hear him speaking? He can fill the void and the peace that you're seeking. It's in your mind and it's in your heart. Depart from iniquity, and he will give you a brand new start. The wages of sin is death. It is God who gives us breath. But the gift of God is eternal life. No more envy and strife and being a low life. We can accomplish this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Put on the whole armor and take up your sword, which is the word of God. Our feet must be shod. With the preparation of the gospel of peace, it is God who gives the increase. I personally have this testimony. I've been down this road, believe you me. I decided to make Jesus my only choice. Thank God I recognized his voice. Keep in mind, this is only the beginning. If you're on the Lord's side, you're in the winning. You have to be filled with the Holy Ghost. The blood of Jesus has been marked on my doorpost. The devil is going to attack. I'm going to keep it real. If you have the Holy Ghost, then you have been sealed. This road, the straight and narrow, is not easy. The adversary doesn't fight fair, and he's very sneaky. But we are more than conquerors through Christ Jesus, our Lord. God doesn't hold our record of wrongs anymore. I'm on the right road now. I know that I can make it anyhow. If you're on the wrong road, get on the right path so you can avoid God's wrath. Crossroads.
Good, get on the right path. There's a line I really liked, I guess a little bit near the beginning, maybe about a third in. Follow your conscience, therein lies the breakthrough. I like
Yes. That. Yes.
Very good.
Yes,
so
that was back in
I didn't know
2004.
about you, that you were a poet.
Say that again?
I didn't realize that you were a poet, so that was lovely to find out.
That's why I said many gifts, much responsibility.
Many gifts. And you do some radio work as well, is that right?
Yes, I do. I actually am a radio host on Ascend FM radio, where I have my own radio show called Live Inspired. I also have my own podcast show, which is called AP Live, which is my first and last name initial, AP Live Live Inspired.
Cool. There's links to that stuff on your website, and most importantly, for our purposes, if anyone's interested in buying the books as well, they can get all that on your website, aleechapitts.com, which I'll put a link to in the show notes as well. Well, it has been absolutely lovely having you on, and I hope that we get some people interested in the book, because it seems like something that I think we can all benefit from. I might give it a read myself once it arrives, because I'm very interested in seeing how forgiveness in particular can actually help, not just the person that I'm forgiving, but actually to cleanse my own soul, as it were, to ease the burden from myself. So I think it's a really interesting perspective, and I can't wait to read it.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for this space and opportunity. The Lord bless and keep you is my prayer.
No problem. Have a great day.
All right,
nice
you
to talk
too.
to you.
Blessings to you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, wow. So the author, the Reverend Aleeceha Pitts, calling in to talk about her book, Learn How to Apologize. So that's an interesting kind of life lesson, just improving your own life by learning actually how to apologize and show empathy for others. In a brief interview there. You can find her at aleechapitts.com, but I'm going to spell it for you because I've never seen Aleechea spelled this way in my life. Aleechea. Pitts, Aleechea Pitts. I've never seen Aleechea spelled that way. So just to make sure that you get it right, if you want to look her up or order her book, aleechapitts.com. So we chatted with her there just about her books, and you can certainly check those out. I think we're gonna move on to our recommendations just to wrap things up. What I'm going to do is we'll do our guilty pleasure book, because that's back. Then we'll do your recommendation, and then we'll do my recommendation to close.
Awesome.
So my guilty pleasure book, and again, I want to clarify this because we haven't done it for a month or two. So anyone who's aware, these are great books. That's not meant to be a negative thing. That's just, I'm always reading classic literature, I'm forcing myself to read like in Spanish and everything, So sometimes you just want something lighthearted and fun, and that's my guilty pleasure, something enjoyable, a page turner. And we've got B.A. Paris. We've talked about her before. Behind Closed Doors. So last time I talked about The Breakdown. This is her first book, and I think it's her masterpiece from the 2 or 3 that I've read. Behind Closed Doors. So we've got Jack and Grace. Jack, handsome, dedicated lawyer, loving husband. Grace, elegant, consummate housewife, prisoner. So what we have is the perfect couple, but it's the perfect lie. So actually, it's not what you think. Grace is actually a prisoner. She's actually captive to Jack. And Jack's this charming... This is 2016, by the way. Jack's this charming guy that everyone likes. And he meets Grace, who is kind of low self-esteem, and they get married very quickly. Whirlwind romance rushes her away. And all of a sudden... how come Grace has to use Jack's email address and isn't allowed her own mobile phone and never goes anywhere without Jack? And then we find that it's very controlling and he's a horrible, manipulative person. But also Grace has a sister, a disabled or a sort of a special needs sister who is going to move in with them soon. And then it gets really sinister because the sister says Jack's a bad man and something's not right here. And Grace is trying to teach her, no, it's all going to be okay. And soon you're going to move in with us. But then she discovers that Jack is not just mistreating her or keeping her prisoner, but actually essentially wants to torture them. And he wants to really, really horribly mistreat her sister. And it's really quite tense and very difficult to deal with sometimes when you're reading this book, actually. Some of the themes. It's a thriller, and you want to see what the hell is going to happen next and how it's going to end. And although it's, 300 or 400 pages, you will read it in 3 days, because it's 350 pages, and there's just a bit at the end. And this quote kind of won't make any sense if you haven't read it. But basically, they find out that the room, they keep telling, the way they figure it out is something's not right with what Jack's saying. Because he keeps her essentially locked in a room, but he has like a fake bedroom. So the guests all see this lovely bedroom, but she's not really in that room, And it turns out that he's going to do the same thing with the sister. So he tells all these stories about like this yellow bedroom and how Millie wants to live in this yellow bedroom. And then someone says, hold on. Earlier, he said that the room was going to be red. And they find this horrible red dungeon.
Oh, no.
And then they say, and then that's how they figure it out. They say, what color was Millie's room? And she says it was red. And then they kind of realize everything that what's going on. I'm not going to spoil like how they get there and all the twists and turns and all the events. But it's a real page turner. And I actually feel uncomfortable almost talking about some of the themes in it just now. But it's a good book. It is a good book. So that's my guilty pleasure. PJ, what is your recommendation for the month?
So my recommendation is to keep it Spanish. I thought I'd mention one of another great author around the time of Benito Pérez Galdós. So he came a bit later. His name was Miguel de Unamuno, and he was a philosopher as well as a novelist, an essayist. And his novel that I recommend is very short, so try to get it to practice your Spanish. But it's also I believe it's also in English. It's called San Manuel Bueno Mártir. So San Manuel Good, the Martyr. And all I can say is this is basically about a man who's conflicted, he's basically a priest. And he's basically deciding to continue on with his profession, even though he doesn't believe in God. And it's all about Christian morality. It's all about Christian morality versus not believing in actual God, but trying to still bring encouragement to the people with Christian morality. So it's kind of like saying that Miguel de Unamuno believes with Christian morality, but he doesn't believe that God has to be in the equation. But nevertheless, he's a bit of a martyr. San Manuel is a martyr because he's still staying in his profession because he knows he can help people, but he doesn't actually believe in God himself. Okay.
Well, before I do my recommendation, I just want to show you this. These are the bookmarks that I got from the reread shop. These are sort of in Galician, so I don't know how good your Galician is. Os dinosaurios non lian desapareceron. So essentially, dinosaurs didn't read; they disappeared. So that's why we should read. And then also, Me vuelves Lorca, the poet Lorca, Me vuelves Lorca, you drive me crazy. So cool little bookmark puns, which the chap kindly gave. There's a couple others he gave me, but these are the only two I have to hand. Now, there's a weird coincidence that your recommendation touches on religion, and I swear we didn't plan this, but my recommendation this month, is also a book touching on quite heavily on religion.
Really?
No, I'm not going to make any claims here, and I'm not going to sort of choose any sides or anything. I'm just going to mention that this book exists, and I find it a very interesting read. It's Zealot by Reza Aslan. It's a number one New York Times bestseller. It's the life and times of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, it's not approached, from a religious perspective necessarily. It's about looking for the historical Jesus and, comparing him. And they effectively say he was part of the kind of zealot group, or not really a movement, but this kind of group in. And the thing is, when I studied this, I studied Roman Judea. So that was an interesting backdrop when I read this. It's 300 pages. It's a short book. And I used to read this as bedtime reading to an ex of mine many years ago. You remember that?
I remember that. Along my own copy of Descartes, you read, like, I gave you a treatise of logic, right? And you were reading that as well.
Yes.
That's
is that yours that I have?
Indeed it is, yeah. And you're reading that at bedtime. So that's the kind of stuff Dean likes to do. Is it called a treatise of logic? Am I getting Descartes?
It's a treatise on human nature. No,
yes,
that's...
thank you. No.
Yeah. No, that's... Hold on. Treatise on human nature is not Descartes. That's Hume.
Oh my God.
Did you give me Descartes' Meditations? Did you give me the Meditations on First Philosophy?
Oh my God, I can't believe... No, I gave you Discord on the Method.
Discourse. I don't think I have that one, so I'm not sure. Maybe I give it back to you.
This sounds like a very hipster conversation.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Guys, answers on a postcard, PO Box, Books Boys, and tell us which book PJ lent me all those years ago. So Zealot, it's interesting. It just chronicles the real, from what evidence we have, Jesus of Nazareth, and from what the Bible's telling us, and obviously we've got other sources like Josephus and everything like that. But we want to look and put Jesus in the kind of society that he was in, based on the other types of religious groups and based on his behavior, the kinds of life he was leading. And I mean, the Zealots were kind of fanatics in a sense, and all. I mean, based on the Bible story, Jesus branded a criminal because he broke some laws. So I don't want to get into all this on the podcast, but if you have any interest in that type of thing, it's certainly an interesting read. And that's my recommendation for the month. It's very curious that we both picked books touching on religion there. So that is pretty much all we have. We've kept it relatively concise, and we're going to end. I have a question for you, actually. We're going to end. You're just relaxed there. You're very chill. You're very chill on the webcam.
I am very chilled. I was very chilled too.
We're going to close with one of your songs, PJ. Do you want to pick one? Do you have one that you would like me to play?
Actually, I'd like to add to that. I'm always not always very chilled, just always very chilled when I do this podcast, because it's good to be chilled.
Physically chilled with a lack of clothing. You're physically feeling the chill. So.
In fact, I was so chilled there that I kind of can you repeat that question? So I'm just very chilled here. So.
Yes, we're going to close with one of your songs this month, and I just wondered if you had one in particular that you'd like to play.
One of my own songs.
Yeah, well, we did one of mine last month, so
One of the songs we play together.
If you want, like whatever you want, you can just do one of your own songs, like whatever, because you sent me some before, so it's up to you. Pick a song.
I wouldn't mind the song about my daughter, "Feel Good Girl."
Okay, I love that one actually, and that was on YouTube as well, guys.
So look it up. Feel Good Girl by.
We can play Feel Good Girl. We can indeed. Did you know that, I don't know if I think I told you this, 3 days or 2 days ago, it was the 6-year anniversary of The Night Hunter.
Oh my God, yes, of course.
Have we
put that on them?
We've never played that. We can play it another time if you want to do Feel Good Girl this time.
All right. I'm in conflict now. All right, let's do Feel Good Girl now, and let them look forward to The Night Hunter.
You can look forward to The Night Hunter.
Build it up right now.
Can you see the vampire fly up to the pretty angels? I love it.
Exactly.
But we'll do Feel Good Girl this time. So, guys, that's all we have. We're going to play Feel Good Girl, and then we'll take you out with our outro credits. Do you have any final words, PJ?
I just have final words are, guys, just take it nice and easy. Life is precious. Read and just meditate and just live. We're always here for you. If you have any questions, if you ever want to chat, if you want to engage, share any thoughts, we're here for you. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So
My
that's it,
final
guys.
words are, I don't know if this show has actually been concise or not. Once I edit in music and ads and things, I'm worried the show is not really going to be any shorter than any of our previous episodes.
We deviated a lot.
But anyway, guys, we've made it to episode 10. We're in double figures. That's great. And thank you everyone for listening. And just,
Nice.
tell other people to listen. Yeah, that's the
Thanks,
best
guys.
thing that you can do. But if you want our extra shows, you know where to find them. There's tons of stuff. And that's it. So we're going to play Feel Good Girl. Get some reading done, guys. And we'll be back in about a month.
See ya.
I'm feeling kind of empty inside. You don't know what to do with your body. You gotta go to the feel good girl. When you're feeling kind of blue and you're stuck inside, can't get it out, go to the feel good girl. That's to the feel good girl. You know you got it. You got it. You gotta go to the field. Gotta go, gotta go field, girl. To the field, girl. Don't know why, but it always helps when I talk to her every night, every day. Feeling kind of blues, yeah. You gotta get out of the house, yeah. But if you can't go because of the quarantine, you gotta call the feel up girl. Yeah, feel good. It's alright to be in the dumps, but you gotta go to the field. Ain't no option at all. You gotta go to the feel good. Call the field. Alright. It's alright. You gotta call the field, girl. You gotta go. Gotta go. Gotta go. Feel good. When you're feeling deep down that you feel good, you gotta call the field, girl. All right.
Books Boys was presented by TheDean and PJ Burke in association with Thaddeus Penguin Productions. This episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Short. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at booksboys@hotmail.com or visit us at booksboys.com. The intro uses Driving in the 70s from the Of Soundtracks and Garage Bands EP by Trapdoor. And the outro uses Dog's Light by Bravo Max from the album of the same name. All music used is either PodSafe or used with permission. If you'd like to support the show, click on the Amazon or Audible referral links on booksboys.com or go to patreon.com/booksboys and get all of the Bufanda Boys bonus shows. Thank you kindly for listening to us. Please tell your friends and come back next time for another episode of Books Boys. Read some books!
I hope you can cut this part out. Oh, okay. Ooh, that's a load off my shoulder. Let's see.
Yeah, I will, yeah.
I don't know why I always do a trend.